You know, some people, they'll get hungry, eat half a bunch of grapes and an apple, and be as hungry 10 minutes later as they were before they had anything, okay? It's not really doing its job then. So what should we drink? Water. We're 2/3 water. It's all we drank for about 2.5 million years. So what happens when we don't drink enough water? We get dehydrated. What happens then? There's lots of things that can go wrong when we get dehydrated, but one particular thing is it can affect brain function, okay? And some people become mentally lethargic quite quickly when they become dehydrated, okay? So one of the things that you might want to consider is keeping an eye on something that will tell you what your state of hydration is. What is that thing?
Thirst.
No, not thirst. No.
Focus.
What?
Focus.
Not focus, no. Any athletes or ex-athletes here, because you'll probably know this, how do you judge your state of hydration? By? Not by thirst, because it's usually too late, eh?
Colour of your wee.
The colour of your wee, that's exactly right. So the trick is to keep it pale yellow throughout the course of the day. If you do that, you're drinking enough fluid. If, on the other hand, it strays into darker tones and you start to make urine that resembles what you believe a wolf would use to mark its territory, okay, then you have become dehydrated. And you would probably do well to up your water intake, okay? And in response to that, you're likely to feel better, literally, within about half an hour. Is it the only healthy fluid? No. There's actual evidence linking tea and coffee consumption with improvements in health, okay? It seems a bit far-fetched that coffee, which generally doesn't have the healthiest of reputations, would be beneficial to health, but it's actually associated with a significantly reduced risk of diabetes. That doesn't mean that it causes diabetes risk to be reduced, okay, just that they're associated. However, both tea and coffee are rich in substances called polyphenols. Polyphenols have what we call antioxidant function in the body, in other words, disease protective function. So if you steep these in hot water, it may not be such a mad thing, okay, that these things are beneficial to health. The problem with them is that they contain stimulants, and stimulants can stop people sleeping and mess up their health in other ways. So you might want to have some, but not too much. So how are you going to cope with this? Well, I would generally advise people who like tea and coffee to have something they really like, because a lot of people who are drinking too much of this stuff will drink anything, instant, machine stuff served into meetings that they didn't ask for, don't want, and only drink because it's there. If you get rid of that, and it's, I don't know, in my case, when I'm in town, it's kind of Nero's or nothing. That's just my thing, okay? I've got an espresso machine at home, which I think is great tasting coffee, okay? So I might have that, okay? But everything else has gone. My capacity now to drink this stuff is significantly reduced, and what I do have, I genuinely enjoy. So one thing before we close is alcohol, okay? So most of us would generally like a drink, and we can justify this because alcohol consumption is associated with the reduced risk of heart disease compared to people that don't drink. Here's the problem. In these studies, sometimes they've included reformed alcoholics and people that don't drink because they've been told don't drink because they've got heart disease. Plus, heart disease, okay, is of an interest to us, maybe, in the long term, but it's not as interesting as this. And the reason that I mention this is that alcohol appears to increase the risk of things like cancer and other conditions that can kill us, so we need to look in the round. And when we look in the round, we get something that looks more like this rather than that curve we had up earlier. In other words, it doesn't appear that alcohol is really very beneficial to health, okay? Now, I'm not saying we shouldn't drink. I was drinking last night, but we might want to do something that enables us to drink less without any sacrifice or deprivation. So imagine you drink, I don't know, 3 glasses of wine, okay? Instead of thinking about drinking less alcohol, you might think about bolting a nice healthy habit alongside that, which might be what? Have a glass of water with it. Because the chances are you're going to drink a bit less. Now you've got also water diluting that alcohol, plus you've had some water you wouldn't have had otherwise. And the overall effect there might be, I don't know, a drink a day without conscious restriction. Here's another thing that's very important. If you want to drink less without conscious restriction, please do not be what when you start drinking? Don't be what? Thirsty, good. And also don't be what? Sober. Don't be what? Hungry. That's exactly right. Because hunger is a major driver of alcohol consumption. So one very simple thing, whether it's beer or wine or whatever, just match it with water and it will keep you out of a lot of trouble. Now, we've gone through a hell of a lot of science and technical detail here, okay, around how you can manage your weight, okay, feel better, look better, and also manage your long-term health in a way that can reduce your risk of chronic disease and even death. You could really add some years to your life and life to your years doing these strategies. Are you going to remember it all? Probably not. There's only one thing you need to remember, really, okay? It's this basic concept. Just eating in accordance with the food that we've evolved to eat, okay? Most of the time, not all of the time, we can still have a drink occasionally, might have the occasional piece of cake, bar of chocolate, okay? But generally, if you keep your diet based on these natural, unprocessed, what you might call primal foods, it's going to keep you out of a lot of trouble, almost certainly, okay? If you want more technical detail, you can look at one of my last 2 books. Thank you very much for listening. Any quick questions? Yes, okay, you, sir.
Can I start with a question? Talking about insulin and keeping the levels down. With people who train and exercise a lot, one of the generally held wisdoms is that the best thing to do is to eat a protein-rich diet, maybe about 7 smallish meals with a lot of green veg and stuff per day, which is generally speaking what I tend to do.
Yeah.
How does that impact the conversation in terms of keeping the insulin levels down?
Well, why would you do that? What's the thinking behind having to eat relatively protein-rich food 6 times a day?
Because, in all honesty, that's what I've read and understood.
So I don't have an issue with the high protein element, because I think that's particularly good if you were seeking to build muscle, which I think is one of your, I was going to say priorities as though you haven't done that. No, one of the things that you have clearly done and probably want to continue to do. But you could apply some intermittent fasting, for example, or some slightly irregular eating around that, but also make sure that immediately after exercise, I say immediately, within half an hour or so, you're having something that's going to replenish your muscles with protein. So that could be something protein rich, even a protein shake, if that was your thing, and some, I don't know, branched chain amino acids or whatever. Do you see what I mean? I would just challenge the notion that you need to eat 6 times a day. And in fact, I suspect you'll get better results not doing that in time. Yeah, okay. You had a question.
With regards to insulin, you touched on this, so I'm curious to know more.
Yeah.
What happens if you do eat excess fat and insulin is low? So say if you do eat butter all day and very low insulin, what happens to that fat?
Well, you can probably store fat without having like high levels of insulin. You can probably still store fat. It's just harder probably to do than when insulin levels are higher, okay? But here's the thing, in a way, what a lot of people find is when they adjust their diet in a way that I would suggest here, right, they often are thinking, I think I'm eating more, and yet I'm losing weight. What's happening, okay? Well, where do those spare molecules go, right? Those fat molecules, what's happened to them? I don't know, but I suspect what's happened to them is they have been taken up. So you've released them from your fat cells. They have gone into your, for example, muscles, where they can be burned as fuel, because that's the other major fuel other than sugar, isn't it? Fat. So in other words, you have basically fed your muscles with a bit of your own fat. And some people believe, actually, that is one of the reasons why this sort of dietary approach causes people to eat less spontaneously. Because what they're not eating, what it appears they're not eating, is now being supplemented with their own fat. Now, one thing that I've noticed in practice over the years is that when individuals eat in this way, it might take them a week or 2 to sort of adjust a bit, flipping over from being predominantly sugar burners to fat burners. But when they do that, they're usually very, very highly energized and warmer. You see that a lot with people. They say, do you know what, I feel warmer, my hands are warmer, I just feel like I suspect what's happening here is through lower insulin, what fat you're eating, okay, is being metabolized more efficiently. Plus, if you're mobilizing fat, that is also being metabolized potentially in your muscles, giving you energy and heat. And that's probably a healthy situation all around than eating a very carbohydrate-rich diet, which is potentially trapping your fat in your fat cells and chronically starving you so that you need food from the outside all of the time. That's the basic principle. Yes, there was a couple of questions here. Yes, start there.
What are your thoughts on the assertion that, like, you know, high protein diets, particularly meat, especially people that are against meat, say that it causes kidney overfunction, it causes stress to your kidneys and also colon cancer and things like that?
high protein diets are detrimental to certain aspects of health, like bone. Bone is one that's constantly quoted, and kidneys. Well, there's no evidence for that. In individuals that have normal kidney function, like I would imagine everyone in this room, it doesn't appear that eating a relatively protein-rich diet has any hazards either there or on bone health either. It's just a sort of myth. With regard to colon cancer, the problem is that, you know, there the link appears to be with red meat and particularly processed meats. Now, these studies are what we call epidemiological studies. They look at associations between things. They can't tell you whether the red meat is causing the colon cancer. Actually, there's quite a lot of studies that don't link the two. Never mind that. Let's focus on the ones that do show a link. Here's a fundamental problem with this sort of evidence, okay? Let's imagine 30 years ago you tell people not to eat red meat because it's unhealthy. Now, people respond to that in basically one of two ways. They either go, "Ooh, I'm careful with my health and they've told me I shouldn't eat red meat, so I'm not going to." Or people, a bit like me, that say, "I don't really care what they said, okay, I'm going to do what I like and what I think is right," okay, and they go off in this direction. Now, down here, okay, on this strand of people, you also have people that will not listen to any health advice, that, you know, smoke and drink and ride fast motorcycles and whatever, okay? People that aren't very health conscious. Now, if after 30 years you do a study and you look at the relationship between red meat and colon cancer, and you find that these people have a higher risk of colon cancer, was it the red meat that caused the problem? You have no idea. It could have been that, but it could have been the fact that they smoke and they drink and they don't eat any vegetables or whatever, do you see? So it's a bit of a mess. The other thing is that I'm really interested in not the impact that a food has on any single disease, but its impact on the overall health. So one way you would do that is to look at vegetarians and meat eaters and go, when we compare these people, is there any significant difference in health? And the answer to that is no, there isn't, okay? Which would lead you to conclude if vegetarians are not living any longer or having less heart disease, for example, than people who eat meat, meat can't be that bad. I mean, if you eat nothing but meat, that's probably bad, okay? But if you're including meat in your diet, that probably isn't bad and may well be good.
Okay, last question.
So, the one in the middle then. Sorry.
My question is about hunger, because sometimes when I get hungry and then I have to lunch during the day, but I have a course to follow, the hunger is over. What kind of mechanism is that of the body?
So what's happened? You've got hungry, you haven't eaten, and then you've...
And I can't eat because I have a course, so I cannot lunch.
So you can't eat because you're busy.
Yeah, exactly. And then after like the hour of the course of the lecture, the hunger is gone. What kind of mechanism is that?
Okay. Sounds good, doesn't it, to be able to do that? I think you'd be a natural intermittent faster if you wanted to try that. You don't need to, I don't think, but if you wanted to, you'd like to do that. So what's going on there? Okay, so one thing that can happen basically when we get hungry is that the body recognizes that it's starved of fuel and then will attempt to fuel itself, right? So you have, for example, sugar stored as glycogen in the muscles and the liver. You've also got fat stored in your tissues. Now, can you mobilize that somehow? Yeah, one way that it appears that we mobilize fuel stores in the body to satisfy ourselves internally, okay, is through the stress response. So it might be that you've just turned on your stress response a bit. The body says, oh, I'm hungry. I'll turn on the stress response, mobilize some internal stores, and therefore that has allowed you essentially to get through. This is a normal adaptive response, remember. You should be able to do that. If individuals can't push through a little bit of hunger like that, not necessarily ravenous hunger, but like I'm getting a bit peckish, and also, you know, once you're sat at college, so you're at college concentrating on something, that is also, I'm not saying stressful, but it challenges the body and also may help mobilize fuel stores internally for you. I suspect that's the mechanism. Thank you very much for listening. I hope you all have